Every Monday, we sit down and take a look at builds made with EMT conduit and maker pipe building connectors. This week, we're going to be checking out a grill cover, a garden enclosure, a boat canopy, a laser cart, and a garden trellis. All kinds of really awesome builds as always. Let's jump right in and check them out. First up, we have this grill cover, and this comes from Chris from Wild Cherry Woodworks. Check out his Instagram and Facebook page. And he has this grill area here, as you can see, and it's like a nice little elevated platform. Looks like just kind of a small wooden patio kind of deck area that he has this grill, and he wanted to basically cover the area and protect the grill, and also I imagine provide some shade if he's out there grilling, and also keep some inclement weather off of the grill and potentially off of him if he's out there doing stuff when the weather rolls through. So he built this really awesome structure, really fantastic job. I love this. He shared a couple of great photos. There we can see there's a flame going up to the frame. But basically here, you can see he used EMT conduit, looks like 1-inch EMT conduit, and then the framework is pretty simple overall, but he incorporated some nice techniques into this. So first of all, we can see the verticals are attached to the wooden patio area down here using the maker pipe flanges. And he's got 4 of those, just one in each corner. There's one hiding back there. And then that sends the 4 verticals going up. But you'll notice the verticals in the front here are taller than the verticals in the back. And this gives the whole structure a nice slant. We can't really see that 4th pole back there. Actually, yeah, we can. There it is. It kind of gives this whole structure a nice slant. So, like we were saying, if rain comes through and you need it to roll off, this has a really nice slant to it. And he accomplished that by basically just using the maker pipe adjustable angle. And now that I have a closer look, I think this is 3/4 inch EMT, not 1 inch, but same design. And basically, he's using the adjustable angle connectors, and those are just grabbing on to these horizontal bars here, basically. And that is just creating that sloped rectangular roof. And then he's using maker pipe T connectors to kind of make this 2-dimensional rectangle up here that the verticals are grabbing onto with those adjustable angles. And then pretty simply, he's got some side-to-side bracing. Those are more T connectors, and that's just sending the pipe across to the other T connector, as you can see there. And then he's got one last angled brace with the maker pipe 45-degree connectors, and then it's mirrored on the other side, of course, with the 45-degree brace, and then this side-to-side brace with the T connectors. So all in all, really not a ton of connectors. I think we can see there's some more bracing back there kind of hiding, going behind the grill with just some more 45 degrees. It looks like it just goes all the way up to the middle vertical there. Oh, so there's 5 verticals instead of 4. So basically just the same kind of thing you can imagine, flange going up to that vertical, and then grabbing on with the adjustable angle connector up there, and then just some 45-degree bracing going up there. There's a lot of markings, but really not a ton going on. It does kind of look like it when you see this, but really not a ton going on there, as you can see. And basically here, he's got the, I think this is probably metal, if I had to guess. Maybe not. I mean, you can see where the flame was touching it. Looks like it kind of maybe melted a little bit. Could be plastic, but either way, you can secure this kind of material to the framework. We've talked about a few different ways you can do this. I believe he is using, I was going to say 2-hole straps, but that's a T connector there. That's not a 2-hole strap. I'm not really sure. Probably what I would imagine and what we've recommended the most is just using some self-drilling screws through the material into the conduit frame. That seems to work really well for situations like this. But you could use, we've seen a few different ideas for using like 2-hole straps or different things like that, but a couple different things you could do there. But I think the self-drilling screws worked pretty well. And we also saw someone recently do the pop rivets, which they make weatherproof ones that are kind of sealed. So I think that's a really good idea and something we want to cover in a video. But really awesome job, Chris. Thanks so much for sharing this. We really appreciate it. Next up is this container garden, and this comes from Jasper. I think they said they have 11 total totes in here. I think they're 7-gallon of the plastic containers, and they have this really awesome garden on their back patio, as you can see here. And then they built this really awesome garden enclosure with 3/4 inch EMT conduit and maker pipe connectors. There we can see the pots that they're using for the gardening. That was earlier on. Now the plants are huge. They said they've got all kinds of animals coming in and stealing from the garden. So had to kind of up their security this year. So they built this really awesome framework. And basically it's just one big rectangle. And we can see here that it has a hidden feature thanks to some hinges. There's some of the aluminum snap-on hinges. We've talked a lot about these on the channel. There's a couple of videos I'll link down below, and I'll also link these down below. They're made for PVC, but you can kind of finagle them and make them work with 3/4 inch EMT. You just kind of have to hand bend them and then use the self-drilling screws. It looks like maybe they use like pop rivets or something there. It's funny, we were just talking about those, but looks like maybe using pop rivets to secure those. But they've got those on the front panel, as you can see there. Those are just self-tapping screws or self-drilling screws, but they got those secured there. And then there's also one on the top as well. So they can really get good access into their garden by flipping those panels, and that's really cool. But basically we can see kind of the starting point of the framework here, where it's those 90-degree connectors in the corners, and those work well for 3-dimensional rectangles. If you're doing a 2-dimensional rectangle like we saw on the roof of the last build, you'd use T connectors, but for this, for corners like this, if you're making a box shape, you want to use 90-degree connectors because they allow you to have the vertical support and the 90-degree supports coming in from the side. So you have 3 total connections there, one in the middle and then the ones coming in from the side. So that's really how you want to make a box shape. Really simple to do. You just 4 of those and you can make the base of a rectangle, and then the top, you do the same thing if you want to make just a solid box. But because this is so unique and it has the top and the front panel that flips apart, it doesn't have 90-degree connectors at the top. Instead, they're using T connectors at the top here, as you can see, and those are basically sending the pipe to the back to another T connector, and it looks like basically the panels that flip up are kind of made separately from the box or the enclosure, and then that way they're able to kind of fold and hinge up. And now I think I finally understand, I see how this works. At first I was kind of confused, like I understood where the panels were going, but I wasn't sure how they were getting there. But I'm pretty sure this is the front panel here, this one, and then directly right behind it is the one that's on the top. So it's kind of 2 pieces that hinge together and then fold up. So you can imagine flipping the front panel up first, and then kind of in the same motion, then the top panel will go up as well, and then you can kind of push them both out of the way there. So as I was saying, I think those 2 panels are kind of separate from the main structure, and then those are attached together with the hinges, and then in the back there, somewhere along this back pole, that's where there's more hinges, so the top panel can hinge. Hopefully that makes sense. If not, leave a comment down below and I'll try to answer questions. But it's pretty cool and a really good idea for making an enclosure that's easily accessible, because you want to keep out the animals, but you don't want to keep out yourself. You want to be able to get in there easily and work. And they said they don't have to do that much in the garden because they have a drip irrigation system set up. But when the time comes, they do need to get in there, whether it's just pulling crops or whatever it might be, then being able to do that really easily with those hinges is a really awesome idea. I think they said they used 1/2-inch hardware cloth with stainless steel zip ties to secure that. Really straightforward and a really great way to secure materials like that. So really awesome job, Jasper. Thanks so much for sharing this in the community. We love seeing it. Next up is a boat cover. This comes from Gary, and this is a really nice canopy. We can see here's a picture of the boat without any cover in it. And if you look closely, you'll see there are some mounts on the boat on the edge there. We'll zoom in here. And basically those are there and allow him to basically drop the verticals in and secure those really easily, so he can take this cover on and off, which is really cool. And I think those are just the normal like fishing rod holders. Those are really great accessories to use, of course, if you're fishing, but also if you want to make something like this with EMT conduit. And I believe you use 3/4 inch EMT conduit, and the framework looks pretty simple and straightforward, where it's basically just the 4 verticals going up from those fishing rod holders. And then up here, I think he's using, if I had to guess, actually it looks like maybe a good technique for the 90-degree connectors that we don't see too often, but it is something really great to keep in mind. Normally we kind of see it how we saw in the last build, where it's flat, the vertical's going completely through the middle of it, and it works well for a box. But you can do it where you kind of flip the 90-degree connector over, and so this horizontal bar can run continuously through the middle of the 90-degree connector there. And then that allows the vertical to come up from the floor, and then it allows the other piece to go to the other side. And that's a really great way to kind of do a technique like this. And you could use the 4-way connector instead of that, where basically, it's like flat, and you have the vertical coming up through the middle of it, then you have the front piece, and then the 2 pieces coming out of the side. You could use the 4-way connector, and you would do that if it's going to be over 10 feet or something like that, or over 5 feet. But anything less than that, you can get away with using the 90-degree connector. If this whole overall span is 10 feet or shorter, you can get away with using a 90-degree connector as long as you brace it, properly in other places. But that's a good technique to keep in mind. We don't see it too often, like I said, but a really great technique. And then the whole thing is just mirrored on the front there, and it's pretty straightforward. I think I see some bracing, maybe a 45-degree from one corner to the other, which is always a good idea. You never have too much bracing. And something, too, you can always add more bracing. So if you build like a big box and then you realize it's not sturdy enough once you add the hardware cloth and all that, if you're making an enclosure, you can always add more bracing later on. That's something that people often forget as well. But really awesome job, nice and simple project. And he said it was a ton of fun to build, and it looks like it's going to be a ton of fun out on the water. So thanks so much, Gary, for sharing that. Really cool to see. Next up is a really simple project, and this comes from ICNA, and they said they got a lot of projects planned, but this first one is a laser cart, as you can see here. And this is the only photo we have of it, so we don't get a really great shot of the framework, but we can kind of see enough here, where basically, as we saw, it looks like they're using, nope, not actually T-connector, or not 90-degree connectors. So, we just talked about using the 90 where you have one in the middle and then one coming out of each side. You could have used that here if you wanted to, but another technique, and you could do this for various reasons, is actually stacking connectors. So if you look closely, you'll see that these are slightly offset, which means this is a T connector, which is just joining the two pieces. So they have the one coming down like that, and then the one coming out of it here, and that's a T connector. And then directly below that is another T connector kind of doing the same thing. So not really sure why they opted for that in this scenario, but like I said, that happens pretty often. It could just be for the easeability of the parts you order, like we saw in Nancy's garden builds recently. Could be a number of reasons, but they basically stack two T connectors to make that 90-degree corner there. And it looks like the same thing here as well for the actual part of the laser bed that is secured to the framework. But overall, just a really simple cart. It's just the 4 verticals going up, and then they use T connectors in different places to basically add some shelving. Here is where the main, laser bed is. So they have this whole kind of 4 rungs going around to support the laser bed. Like I said, those are connected with T connectors. And they've got some more storage underneath. And so they basically just added some crossbars wherever they needed storage. We can also see up here, same kind of deal. They got a T connector going from one side to the other, and that's supporting a piece of plywood on top. And like I said, we don't really get a good view of the whole cart from like a wider or far away angle, but we can see enough of it to see that it's pretty simple, and it looks like it's getting the job done. They said they wanted to get their feet wet with projects and kind of get started, which is really awesome. Really great project, ICNA. Thanks so much for sharing this. We love seeing it. And last but not least is a trellis from Gary. And I'm excited about this one because this is a technique I don't think we've ever seen for trellising with EMT conduit and maker pipe. So the overall structure in the framework is pretty straightforward. We've seen a ton of projects like this where basically it's just the 4 verticals going up, and then another great example of the 90-degree technique that I mentioned, where the 90-degree connector is flipped over, and that allows the horizontal to run continuously through it. And then the 90-degree pipes coming out of the front and the bottom are basically secured in that way using that technique that we were just talking about with the 90-degree connector. And that's really it for the framework. It's just those 4 90-degree connectors, and I think maybe there's a crossbar up top. No, actually, I can't tell from this angle. Yeah, it looks like okay, so it's 6 verticals, and they're secured, 6 verticals. So the 4 outer ones are secured with 90-degree connectors, and I think the other ones are just grabbing on with T connectors, if I'm not mistaken. So pretty straightforward design for the framework. But what's something really cool that I've never seen in a build, at least I don't remember seeing, is they use some of the off-the-shelf chain that you can get from like Lowe's, Home Depot, Ace Hardware. Most hardware stores, home improvement stores sell it. Basically just a chain that you can get. It's pretty inexpensive, and they basically have that secured to the framework, kind of wrapped around the poles in the framework, as you can see, and that is what they're hooking the tomahawks on, the tomato hooks. Those are just hooking onto those, which is really awesome and a really fantastic idea, because we've seen people kind of get those hooks and then bend the hook to kind of wrap around conduit. But then you have to add a bunch of conduit back and forth, which is going to increase the rigidity of the framework, but oftentimes it's overkill and just adds a lot of expense to the frame that you don't really need. But you can get this inexpensive frame and secure it how they did, which is basically just wrapping it around the framework and kind of zigzagging it back and forth. You could also do what we've talked about in the past, where you use some connectors and different solutions for securing the chain to your build or the cable. But then you have a really great thing that you can hang off these hooks for trellising your plants. which is a really great idea, something I've never thought of, and so I'm really glad that Gary shared this. Really awesome job. Thanks to everybody for posting your builds. We love seeing them. As always, these will be linked down below if you want to check any of them out in more detail. Thanks everybody for watching. If you enjoyed this, please leave a like and consider subscribing. Post videos like this every week. I really appreciate you being here. Thanks so much. We'll see you in the next one.